Hi everyone, I'm Nick Laidlaw. I'm the SVP of Digital Marketing from Rightpoint. And today we're going to talk about three topics very quickly. We're going to talk about Helix, Habitat, and SXA. These are all things that have been getting a lot of chatter, or there's a lot of chatter about it. And we want to first just intro some of the concepts, tell you some of the pros and cons from our opinion, and then we're going to pass it over to the folks at BrainJocks who are going to dig in a little bit deeper under the hood. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Marnocha from Rightpoint Detroit office.
Before we get started, how many here have heard of Habitat, Helix, SXA? I'm assuming a lot of you have if you've been to Symposium, which is great. How many of you have had a chance to work with SXA? That's good. One of the main reasons why we thought it would be a great idea to talk about these concepts is to first try to clear up a few questions that are probably out there. I myself, I had questions about this, and I've been able to learn quite a bit. And we want to try to just impart you with some information so that you can make the decisions for yourself whether or not to leverage some of the principles of Helix that are also applied within SXA, and to be informed about the decisions that you make. All right, so first thing, what's Helix? And then we'll talk a little bit about Habitat. Helix, it's really Sitecore's recommendation, and they can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's starting to feel like Sitecore is making some recommendations in terms of how you can structure your solutions and how you can structure your architecture within Sitecore. And it's understandable why they would make some of the choices that they've made and to start to push developers into this direction. Mainly, you can start to see that projects will have a lot of consistency in terms of the overall structure and how code is developed, so that if one agency is working on a project to start for the first year and another agency happens to pick up the project, or another development group picks up the project the following year, they already know how the site was architected and how everything was structured, and there's less ramp-up time. So from that side, it definitely does make some sense. It also makes sense in the terms that everything is a feature, and so therefore everything is very testable. You can unit test against your features in code, and you can do that also in a consistent manner.
So the Helix architecture has fundamentally three layers. The first layer is the project layer up at the top, and that's really what kind of the user sees, or what would be useful to them. It's the context of the solution. It's your page types, your layouts, your graphics that you see in the front end. Features is more concrete, feature as the word indicates. But it's news, articles, promotions, things that are finite in their function and can be defined and kind of scoped. They could be reused, although I don't think Helix is necessarily all about reuse. It's more, I think, in my opinion, more about maintenance and in the standards, like Nick was mentioning. And then foundation is really kind of all your core code and components that you would share across. Even some of the modules that you rely on, JavaScript frameworks, presentation frameworks, things like that. So I think later on we're going to have someone talk about more in depth in Helix, but just to set up the framework for which SXA is built on.
When I work with the mic, it's down here. Less static. Before we jump into a little bit about SXA, I want to talk about habitat. There's a lot of, I'm speaking for myself here, but I was pretty confused about habitat when it first came out, or when we first started to hear about it. I started to think about it as an accelerator, or is this supposed to be the starting kit for every site that we build? And I was able to get some answers about this at the MVP Summit back in September, I guess it was now. And the reality is that habitat was not really meant to be a starter kit or an accelerator in itself. It was just an example of how the Helix principles are applied to a sample site. So that really helped to clear things up from my perspective, that this was really just an example so that you could see Helix principles applied in a working site, so that you can dig into some code and see how things were done within this sample. It's not necessarily meant to be the starting place for every site that you build. Which leads into SXA, the Sitecore Experience Accelerator. The Experience Accelerator is really it's a starting framework in a sense, where you have a number of features or components that can now be applied to your solution for rapid deployment of pages and sites. And the reason why the order that we went through in terms of Helix, Habitat, and SXA, there's a reason for that. SXA is built upon the Helix principles. It really just takes all of the methodologies and the overall framework that's applied within Helix, and it's incorporated into SXA. So Mike will talk a little bit about some of the features, and then we'll continue on. There you go, man.
Break the mic again. So SXA is really, it's a lot of things, right? It's kind of hard to explain. I mean, Nick said it right about it's an accelerator. To start off with, it's an add-on module from Sitecore. I was kind of confused as someone who didn't attend Symposium, looking at the materials and things, and I thought it was more of what is in 8.2 as the actual product, but it's actually a module that you can choose to use or not use. It is actually compatible with 8.1 and 8.2. So, it brings in that option for existing customers on that layer as well. It's based on the Helix architecture, like we said. It is price licensed separately. So if you're evaluating it, that's a consideration, that it does have a cost in addition to your traditional license. As well as if you're a developer trying to play around with it, you need to make sure that your license is up to date and has the SXA provision into it. So it's a toolkit of pre-built components for accelerating site creation. It also manifests as a new tab in the Sitecore UI, and we'll see that further in the demos. It also has some information architecture for a starting point for pages, for the components, how you create a site, what features are available, and even the settings that you drill down into the site. So a lot of projects, that's the first thing that you start with is your information architecture. This is going to get you one step forward and move forward, something that you can customize and add on to. It's not necessarily the end architecture, but a base to start from. There is a site creation wizard, so obviously with Sitecore traditionally you have to start writing components and building things to get a site up and running, but this has the tools to create a site right out of the box. And I think that's a unique thing Sitecore was looking for to differentiate in the market or compete in the market, I guess, with other open source or competition. So now they can check that box and have that available. There's also a theme and a wireframe mode concept where you can we'll get to in kind of the why slide, but you can create the site without having all the branding, and essentially work in kind of this wireframe mode, and export and import themes. So you can sort of change the pattern of how you implement a project by doing that. It is mobile first with responsive and adaptive support. It has a drag and drop page designer, and it's also extensible for the developers and customers who want to customize it. They can move forward and add their own customizations, components, and work within the same framework. So why, what's the big selling point? Obviously, Sitecore wants to push this as a value add to their customers, and the reason it can be valuable to customers is a reduced time to market, or one of the advantages can be a reduced time to market. Sort of on the top line is potentially your traditional waterfall project, where the first box is user experience, figuring out your what pages you need and the user experience that you want to have. The next blue box is your visual design, so the graphics and colors and page components that you want. Then you have to implement all that in the gray as a front-end development, your HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Then you go into the back-end development of some of the more core components that you need to build the site, to make it function, maintain, auto creating sites, and making it configurable. And then last in the project, and sometimes the most lengthy part of the project, is the content entry. And you have to wait, until you're done entering content to launch the site. So the advantage of SXA then is potentially going into this parallel site creation where you can overlap because of some of the features and the export and import. You can actually do the wireframing or user experience within the tool, and then start your visual design quickly after that. But the key point is really the content entry. This box here is brought up into after the user experience is already completed, right? So as soon as you have your page templates and components, the end users could enter content into the system and start seeing their pages. That's always something we try to do in traditional projects, is bring that forward, but it's really hard for end users to envision what the page is going to look like and how the content might react. So having this wireframe mode gives them a little more flexibility in seeing that.
I think that's probably one of the biggest advantages. We're just going to talk a little bit about where does SXA fit, when does it make sense. But just trying to bridge off of what Mike said there, the biggest advantage that I see, aside from the fact that you can speed up your implementation time, is that you can get content editors into the system sooner, getting their content into Sitecore. I don't know about you, but I've tried this, and other developers have tried this within our organization, where you set up all your data templates and have your customer go into Sitecore and just enter in as much content as they can. That's really hard to do because you just can't see what it's going to look like presented on the page. And with SXA, it's not necessarily going to show them the final design, but they can see it in context and get a better sense of how that content is going to flow, or if there are going to be any issues with their content before you've really started to do a lot of development. So where is SXA a good fit? And this is just our point of view. We see that there's a good fit for microsites, or if you need to just spin up a bunch of sites quickly with some fairly simple components. You can pretty rapidly get things configured and skinned and deployed. Seems to make a lot of sense. If you have multiple sites that just have a little bit of shifts in terms of branding, That's another good situation where SXA fits. Anytime that we're dealing with low complexity, brochureware type sites where you just have some contact forms or things like sliders, promos, that may be a good fit for SXA as well, because some of the components are already pre-built. And any smaller sites that are looking to just get out to market quickly so that you can start to take advantage of some of the more advanced features that Sitecore really wants customers to work with, such as personalization and A/B testing. If you're a Sitecore partner and you don't really have a lot of front-end designers or stylers, maybe a good way to just kind of get your framework out there so that your customers can start to see how things are going to function. And if you're dealing with a situation where your timeline needs to be condensed, actually every project is like that, but in extreme cases where you have very little time and you need to try to spin something up pretty quickly.
So where might you pass on XA, or I prefer to think of it as wait until it's a little hardened or industry tested. Obviously your large complex implementation, maybe your legacy environment that already has lots of customizations and components to mix SXA with non-SXA might be a little difficult for the users to understand or get both concepts. Custom React and Angular, so there's potentially some conflict in, obviously because it's a pre-built tool, there's some libraries and functions that is already built into the platform to serve up the pages that you might run into conflicts with, so you might want to be careful there. If you have less technical savvy content authors is how I explain this. It is very, I'll say web forms for marketers-ish, in that it can get pretty hairy and complex pretty quick. Obviously you can limit and scale things down appropriately with roles and the different features that you make available to your users, but it can also get pretty complex, right? With lots of power, there's lots of switches and potential to go off a path that may not lead them to success. If you're already a big .NET MVC shop and capable of quickly cranking out new components and are established with your DevOps and patterns to build and publish sites, you may not need it, right? It's an additional cost, and you have full control over everything, from performance and every layer. You can already get your site up quickly. And then maybe an outsourced or a team where you need those rigid boundaries, that model where you have content entering in while you're doing front-end development and back-end development certainly isn't the for the faint of heart, I guess, as a good way to put it. And it can get pretty complex, right? So some projects you need those strict boundaries, whether contractually in how you're running a project or based on the team's location or limitations.
So we're going to really quickly just show you what the process is for setting up a new site or tenant. And this is just going to be through some screenshots, and then we're going to pass it over to BrainJocks, and they'll dig a little deeper into under the hood. But we thought it would make sense for you to just get an idea of, well, what do you start with? So Mike will step through a few screenshots here, and we'll stay within our 20-minute time slot so that you can get an idea of what the process is.
So the first part is tenant and site creation. So when you go into Sitecore and you've installed SXA and the required components, you won't really see a new shiny button to click on. You actually have to kind of do something to see it manifest. So if you right-click on the content part of the tree, you can now insert a tenant and tenant folder. The folders are really just meant to organize your website, so internal versus public versus microsites, right? You can have a different organization structure. Tenants control different features and functions, but you will want to create folders and tenants. When you go through that process, it's going to ask you for what features you want to enable. So you can control this at a tenant level if you have a microsite that you don't want to use sticky notes, for example. You can choose and set that up at the beginning and go through the provisioning steps. It uses PowerShell in the back end, so there's some prerequisites there, but it will execute that script and create a site. Once you have that, then you can create a site item underneath that. And again, there's different tabs of features. There's some host name setup and language configuration. Again, more features at the site level in what you want to control. And then the last tab is around themes. There's the wireframe theme and a basic theme, but you'll likely want to create a new theme as you create your site so that you can export it and import it back in. Or if you've already built, different themes for your microsite, and this is just a new site, then you can choose exactly what theme you want them to have or be able to use. That's going to create your site, and like we said earlier, as far as the information architecture, let me zoom in here. So when you create a site, there's actually some structure that gets created underneath. So there's obviously your home page, but then there's also folders for data, presentation, information, and then also settings. So there's a lot of things that are already set up for you when you create a site. There's also templates that get created as well. So if you dig into the tree, down in the templates section, you can start to see some of the Helix principles here in their naming of the folders. So there's a foundation, features, and project. Within the project folder is all of the tenant information and subfolders that you created. And then you can dig down into the actual page templates, which inherit from the master foundational components within SXA. And then finally, there's the Experience Accelerator tab, and I won't give too much away, but this is the new tab in which when you're editing your pages, you can drag and drop from the toolbox on the left here, the different sliders, rotators, tabs, data elements that you want on a page. I've even seen already a blog post about someone creating a location finder with maps all built all out of the standard SXA feature. So it's pretty feature rich and a lot to explore and get started, and it lines up with a lot of the components that you would normally build in a traditional implementation. So it's going to save you a lot of code.
Okay, and just to wrap up, and want to say this is kind of the Sitecore way where you still get a blank canvas. It's like when you install Sitecore and you just have the home node. This is the XXA version of that. Just final thoughts, prototype. I think that's really the best way for you to figure out if SXA is going to be right for your implementation. It doesn't take long to install and to get it set up. What takes longer is just going through the documentation on Helix and understanding how everything is structured within Helix. But once you have the concepts down and you're looking to try out SXA, it doesn't take long and you'll be able to be up and running quickly. So if there's one thing that we would just leave you with is just try it out, and you'll be able to start to weigh the pros and cons based on your unique situation. So we want to thank you very much. We wanted to just give you that primer, and we'll hand it off to the next group to dig in a little bit deeper on SXA.
Hello, everyone. So, who has not seen SXA? All right, everyone else, the bar is back there. So, so I am McCurry with BrainJocks.
And I'm Dmitry Harnitski from BrainJocks as well. And today we're going to talk about SXA. So we already got some high-level overview what SXA is, and we're going to have a little bit deeper dive into SXA feature. And before we're going to talk about, I will take a microphone. So before we're going to talk about what you could do with SXA, maybe you could spend and give you a few ideas about what you could do in order to start working with SXA. So to start use SXA, you need to have Sitecore version 8.1 or 8.2. So if you sitting on previous version, you need to upgrade. Also, you need to remember that SXA works only for MVC products, or for MVC projects. So if you still on web forms, so this may be a good time for you finally switch to MVC and be modern and join us. Also, what you need to have SXA license, of course. And if you don't have it yet, please contact your Sitecore account manager. They will be glad to help you. And that's basically all prerequisites. So in order to get SXA installation package, you need to go to Sitecore developer portal, and this is the same place when you get your Sitecore packages. And if you need documentation, you need to go to Sitecore documentation portal. And we encourage everybody to, like, if you want to work with SXA, to check it frequently, because we see lots of progress with this documentation. New pages appearing at least every week, maybe even often. And as soon as you got package, you could install that package. And setup process is very straightforward. It's very similar to any marketplace package. The only difference that you will download it from Sitecore portal, not from marketplace. There is one prerequisite, is Sitecore PowerShell module. And this is only for CM instances. If you want to do scaffolding here for your content delivery sites, you don't need it. Also, what is great about SXA, in order to start working, you don't need to be developer. You don't need to have Visual Studio. You don't need to have something like, so all these developers tools are not necessary. You just install the package and you could start scaffolding your sites. You already saw the experience, so it's very straightforward. And for building something like microsite, again, just use your Sitecore and your imagination, and this is all what you need. So now, if you know how to start with SXA, we could talk about great stories that you could find inside SXA. So first one is features, and you saw these features in previous demo. So when you scaffold your tenant, there are some features that are available for you. When you scaffold your site, there are other set of features. And for every site, every tenant, you could pick what you're going to use. But what is great here, not just these features, but these features are not hard-coded. They are fully dynamic. So configuration for these features is stored into Sitecore. And you could find predefined features that are coming with SXA. And also, of course, you could modify these features, but what is maybe more interesting for you, you could build your own feature, and you could very organically integrate it into SXA scaffolding process. So you could build a very unified experience when there will be no difference between out-of-the-box features and your custom features. So what you could do with features, you could add items, you could modify items that you have in Sitecore. you could edit theme, and if this is not enough, you could execute scripts. So you could have your PowerShell script that will be executed as part of your feature scaffolding, and every site that use your feature will get what you wrote in this PowerShell script. So that was one story. And second story is Creative Exchange. So Creative Exchange is site is like SXA area that designed for creative people, like how you could help creative people and developers work together at the same time. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I'm going to show you how it works, so you could decide on your own, like, does it worth it, or like how you could use it for your life. It's back. Okay, so what we have here, let me refresh this. I built a simple page, and in this page we have some header, some footer, and we have a few components. And one of these components is style. And as you could see, this is not very styled. And this is how you could you could work in parallel with your creative team. So you could build your custom component, you could build the content, and you don't need to worry too much about your styling. So as soon as you build your page, what you could do, you could use Creative Exchange, and it's here. This is what I need to do. So there is a special tab that is added after you install SXA, and in this tab there are two buttons. And on this page I'm using site theme, and now what I can do, I could grab what I just built, and I could create a offline package with everything that I just built. So that package will include HTML, it will include JavaScript files, CSS files, images, and it will be offline package that I could like put in my pocket and be completely independent from Sitecore team, and I could present it to stakeholders. I could do lots of other stuff with this. So this is dialog, and here there are a few options, and you could just grab one page, or you could grab few pages, or if your site is still very small like this one, you could grab whole site. And you could pick like what kind of package you're going to generate. It could be editable package, so that package that you could edit and import back, and you could edit what user will see, so it's preview mode, or you could edit what content editor will see, so you could edit your editor experience. Or you could just wrap the whole site, and you could archive it into one zip file, so it will be transferable, or you could drop into folder, and this is more for scenarios when you have source control and you want to track history. So you could do drop after drop into this folder, commit into source control, and you will have history you could roll back. We don't want to do it right now, but we will just generate a simple content package. Okay, so we created that package. We will download it, and this is a zip package. This is not a Sitecore module. This is just a zip package with files inside. And you could see we have HTMLs here, and inside this folder there will be all these media assets and JavaScripts and CSS. So you need to extract it, because you cannot do much inside a zip file. So I'm going to extract it. And now, remember what we just saw here. This is our page design in Sitecore. And let's check what we got. So I will open this folder, and I will just click this index file. Boom. So this is our offline page. So you could do whatever you want with this. So we don't want to just look at this. We want to modify it. We want to apply our creativity and make it look beautiful. So let's do this. And for this, again, you don't need to have Visual Studio, like real Visual Studio. You just need to have any page editor, any file editor, Notepad, and in my case, it's Visual Studio Code. So this is my file, and now we could start editing. So we could do a few things here. And one thing that we could do, we could work with our media assets. So on our page, we have image. So, okay, maybe that image is not good enough, and I want to replace it. So I could do it with Creative Exchange. So I think we don't need this. I prepared image. And I will drop it, so it will be available for our HTML page. So I will drop it to the same location where my original image is stored. So it will be easier for me to manage paths. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start using this image. So this is HTML for my promo, and this is linked to my image. And what is new image name? It's Sitecore logo title, and we have Sitecore logo. I'm just going to change this name. Save it, verify that this is what we want. Yeah, okay, this is new image. So next step. Also what we could do, we could apply some style to this component, or like not just this component, to any component on this page. So I will work with promo, and there is some magic word here, and this word will allow you to find all places when you could apply styles. It's add new CSS classes here, so it's pretty self-explanatory. So this is my promo component, and I want to add my class. My test style. And now I need to build this style, because you still need to build CSS, unfortunately. So nobody will do it for you. Okay, let me find. Okay, so this is my CSS, and I'm going to be very creative here. If I misspell something, please let me know. So background will be, I like green color. So this is my style. Let's check how it's going to work. Okay, it's here. But it's all happened in offline file. So this is something that your creative guy could do in her or his Mac machine. So it's not connected to Sitecore at all. So now we need to import it back into Sitecore and see what will happen. So in order to do this, we need to so I need to return to my folder, and here I need to again package it into zip folder. So it's just zip, and now I need to import it. So I'm returning to Sitecore, and I'm going to use import dialog. This is much simpler. I just need to pick package. upload. It's to some degree similar to content packages. So it's here. Now we could install it. And when we will install it, you will see what exactly will happen after we click next. So what we see here, that our image is added into Sitecore as a media set. And our style is updated. So all CSS, all JavaScript files are stored as media sets. So our CSS was updated. And also, we created new style. So this style is registered into Sitecore. And this style not just created into Sitecore, it's applied to component. And the last one, I think this is our image that not just added into Sitecore, but this image is applied to a component as well. So let's check how it's going to look like. I will refresh page. So it's here. It's new image, it's new style, and to show you that it's not just some dark magic behind the scene, if you will go to styles, you see, so style is in Sitecore, and style is applied to this component in very SXA-friendly way. So I think that's it, that you need to know about Creative Exchange and start working with this, so it works. And Dylan is going to talk about other features.
So Creative Exchange is Dmitry's favorite feature, and it's really cool, but there's some debate internally at BrainJocks on whether or not we like this or not.
My design?
No, the Creative Exchange. So our front-end devs love Sass, and so it doesn't come with Sass out of the box, and so it's kind of a thing. But anyways, all right. Let's go on and let's talk about, where's the clicker? Here we go. Let's talk about partial and page designs. So oftentimes with your Sitecore sites, you have to define a header, you have to define a footer, you have to define, many different body styles. Like maybe you got like a 2-column and the right side's wide and the left side's got like a rail in it and things like that. And oftentimes you want, all of your product pages or your news pages to kind of have the same look and feel. Partial designs and page designs are how you achieve that, right? So here you can see I've got multiple partial designs that I've sort of defined here in this kind of mock-up. On my header, I've got navigation, search, branding. On my footer, I've got links and a map and so on and so forth. SXA comes with all of these components that I've put here out of the box, right? So if you want a map component, you want to put it in your footer, you can do it. You can use partials to do it, right? The important thing to note about the partials is you can actually have a placeholder within a partial, and then when it's applied to a page, you can actually drop things into it. So it makes it a little bit different than some of the other features that you may have seen in the past that do this sort of same thing. Here, I've created a page design, and I've applied all 3 of my partials to it. So you see how it kind of merges the presentation of all of those things. Now, when I'm in Sitecore, I can take that page design and I can apply it to my pages, either one-off, kind of ad hoc, or I can apply it kind of globally to my page templates. So let's take a look at where this is in Sitecore. We have a mouse. We have a mouse. So if I come out to Content Editor, and we look at the information architecture just a little bit more, you'll see that we have home, media, data, presentation, and settings. So your partials and your page designs are underneath the presentation, and they're defined here under partial designs and page designs, right? Now this is my kind of favorite feature of SXA because you can swap these out ad hoc, and you don't have to go back and reset presentation on all your items. So you guys have probably had the situation before where you've had a 2,000-page site, and something new needs to get added, and now you got to go back and reset presentation everywhere. It's kind of a pain, So I can come into my header footer partial here that we've created, and I can open it up in Experience Editor, and I can start to design what this will look like, right? So if I move the toolbox out of the way, you can see we've got a title component, we've got this text component, right? Maybe I could split this up with rows and columns and do sort of whatever I want. But in the spirit of time, we've only got those 2. So after I build out all the partials that I want, depending on whatever my business use case is, I can come and I can make page designs, right? Now, my page designs, you see we've got a home page design here, but really you can make a product page design, you can make a product page design too, you could have like multiples of them. And whenever you look at these, they basically allow you to select the partials that will compose that page design, right? Now, if I come up to my page design folder here, I can assign my templates to my different designs, right? So that's really powerful, and I can swap them out whenever I want, just publish, and it affects my entire site. I love this feature. So if I come up to my home page here, I don't like how this always prompts whenever this particular field is on the page. But anyways, go up to my home page here, open this up. You can see that because this page was using that design, right, I've got this title component up here, and I've got this text component down here. Now, one thing you might notice, this text component's not editable from this page, right? But this title component is. And it's because the title component pulls from a field on the page, right? That allows me to edit it. All right. So the next really important feature to understand is rendering variants. Now, I have to admit, I didn't like this feature when I first saw it. I saw it demoed. I thought it was kind of crazy, some black magic. It's kind of complicated to wrap your head around, but it's really, really powerful once you kind of get the hang of it. And what rendering variants do is they allow you to change the markup and the fields that your components are driven off of, right? So you can inject more fields into your components, and you can change them from divs to H1s to H2s, whatever you want to do, okay? And it's really important because when you start to decompose a design, you're going to see repeatable patterns, and then you're going to, say, well, I need to make a custom rendering to make that work. Well, you don't have to with rendering variants most of the time. So let's take a look at some rendering variants, and I'll show you sort of why we need this. So you can see that this is a title component right here on this page. If I preview this page and take a look at the actual markup it generated, it's an anchor tag inside of a div, inside of a div, inside of a div. There's no H1. There's no SEO value there, right? So I can fix that by creating a rendering variant. So let me come back out into the editor, go down into my rendering variants area, which is under presentation, under rendering variants, and you can see here all of the components out of the box in SXA that support rendering variants, right? If I come to this title component here, there's a default variant, but I'm going to insert a new variant. I'm going to call this one page title, because I'm going to make it an H1. I'm going to fix it. Now, I wanted to stop right here and let you take a look at that and see kind of what you get with rendering variants out of the box. So I can add fields, I can add placeholders, I can add sections, which are basically like divs with CSS classes. So I can make all kinds of markup here. But what I really want for this demo is just a field, right? And the field I want is the page title. So and it's title, and it's on the base template that comes with SXA. So once I add that in, you can see here I'm able to change the tag from a div down to an H1, right? Let me save that. And also I can do things like prefixes, suffixes, I can do all that stuff. So I'm going to put a prefix in here, do like that, save. So the last part to this is I have to actually go to my design, and I have to actually apply the rendering variant to the rendering, right? So let me open up the header footer and show you what that looks like. Now you'll notice right here, this is not a Sitecore 8.2 feature. This is an SXA feature, this variant. I'm able to click it, and I can select this page title and save it. Now when I go back out to my page and look at it, we can take a look at the markup, and you'll see instantly, it'll be recognizable that the rendering actually changed. Let's come back out here and look at our page. And you can see that it is now bigger. It's got this sort of prefix on it. And if I preview the page and inspect element, you'll see that it's an H1 tag. So that's sort of the importance with rendering variants. Now, this was a trivial example, right? And when me and Dmitry first started looking at this, we had questions around some of the search components built in and whatnot. And we, at BrainJocks, we do a thing with search where we kind of let pages define what they look like in search, and we'll always have an image and text and other text and links and all kinds of crazy stuff. And we asked on Stack Exchange, how do you make that work in SXA? And the answer is rendering variants, right? So it's a very, very powerful feature, and it's something that I really like, and I want to kind of dig in farther into this, in the future. So, if you're a developer in the room, you might ask, how the hell do I make my own rendering, right? What do I do to make a component? And I don't want to say we ripped this slide off, but this slide is a culmination of a couple of different, sources. At the end of the day, it's still Sitecore, right? Make a controller rendering. Unfortunately, it's recommended that it is a controller rendering, right? Inheriting from SXA standard controller. Now, if you do this, you'll notice if you poke around inside of SXA, they've actually got some IOC set up out of the box for you. So it kind of changes the way you define your renderings a little bit if they're controller renderings. But keep that in mind. Your rendering model should inherit this rendering model base, right? And that gives you access to this model.cssclasses.aggregate down here on your divs. And you always want to wrap every component in a wrapping div that does this class aggregation. And that will make you Creative Exchange compliant, right? So this is sort of, if you want to make your own rendering, take a look at this slide. There's other examples on the internet that kind of lay out these steps, and you should be able to get pretty far, right? Now the cool thing here, and Dmitry touched on this, is, okay, I made a component. How do I make it so my sites can use it, right? Well, you can inject yourself into the scaffolding via touching the Sitecore system settings feature area down there. And that's an SXA thing where their scaffolding script basically looks at that portion of the tree and it's dynamic, and it will just create your thing if the user wants it. So another cool feature, you might have seen back here, this query. If you have a data source, that $site, that's not a Sitecore thing, right? How many times have you had to write a Sitecore query and it's like a nightmare to get it right? You can't debug it. It is insane. They've got a few queries here, or tokens for your queries, that make things really, really easy. The one I really appreciate, it's kind of a subtle one, is the templates, $templates. If you ever make a component that needs to pick like a page type, like maybe search results wants to restrict itself to a certain type of page, knowing where your templates are to just show a list of those is really powerful. You can make your own tokens via a pipeline, of course. It's Sitecore, right? The other thing that we really appreciated was the component styling, right? So whenever I'm on a component, almost all components support being able to inject different CSS classes. And that really, really helps with reusability, because you could have a promo component and it's got certain fields on it, but your designer created that in 5 different styles. Well, now you can create styles for each of those and handle it that way. The toolbox that you guys saw, the folder names in the toolbox are driven by the folder names of your renderings, right? So if you ever want to change them or add new ones, that's how you do it. And one of the last things is the components that you get out of the box are really powerful. Now, it's not like a silver bullet. There's no like mega menu. There's a lot of things that are missing. But that first time you have to make a carousel in Sitecore is kind of it's a trick, right? And so they have a carousel built in. They have accordion built in. They have tabs built in. It's all nice. There's a flip component, which is kind of funny. I've never seen a use for that kind of component. But anyways, it's there. And then there's built-in search components. And then there's configuration that you get for Lucene and Solar, right? So if you want search on your site, you can just drop in a search box, start dropping in the search results. You can throw in filtering and faceting, and it's all there. And it's all separate renderings, so you can put it wherever you want on your pages. And yeah, that's pretty much our interpretation of SXA, and I like it. I think it's cool, but again, it's not a silver bullet. Like Rightpoint was saying, it's really for your microsites and anything you want to stand up rapidly and quickly. It's got a lot out of the box to help with that. Some of the best resources on the web that we found during our research, the Sitecore Slack channel. If you guys aren't in there, you should go get in there. You got to look at Akshay's blog. He can get you in. There's an SXA channel on Sitecore Slack, and they're very, very helpful in there. And then the other place is the Sitecore Stack Exchange. There's 2 dozen or so questions up there that are really, really helpful. So hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
So good stuff. Who is a little more excited about SXA now? I know that, yeah, it's a bit of a game changer. A lot of this stuff is changing things. I particularly like what's going on with Helix because, as I said earlier, now we're actually going to be able to have sites dropped in our lab and drop sites into other people's labs, and not everybody's going to have to reinvent the wheel every time. So now we move on. Who would say that they've got a site of significant size? Nobody? Pretty big sites. Publishing, always a nightmare, right? Large sites, publishing goes slow. One of the biggest complaints we get from clients and that we hear from other clients is that publishing is a problem on a large site. Sitecore is solving that problem with a new publishing service. And of course, new infrastructure, new technologies, that's always going to get Patrick excited. So here's Patrick Perrone from Arke to tell us more about the new publishing service.
Thank you, Andy. So there was a number of great presentations at Sitecore Symposium, and some of you who attended, maybe you got to attend Stephen Pope's presentation on publishing. So if you have, this will be a bit of a rehash for you. If you haven't, however, this should be pretty exciting information. And to the extent that you are excited about this, I think all credit's due to Stephen Pope. To the extent that you're bored by this, that's on me. So hopefully you're not bored. Andy's a tough crowd. So limitations of the current model, right? Things that complicate publishing. Well, you can have multiple publishing targets, you have multiple languages, and these exacerbate your publishing times. So if you've ever had a multi-language site, maybe you've run into this. If you have multiple targets, a web and a preview target, let's say, you maybe have seen some of this. There's also issues with geolocated publishing targets. So what I mean is, if you've got your CM in one location, in the United States, let's say, and then you have a target, a CD server out there, and it's in the UK. And you need your CM's in the United States, you need to publish, so there's like information transfer going on. Hopefully you've got a SQL server co-located to the CD server, but you've got to transfer information. And so publishing can be an issue with this. And we'll see why. Parallel publishing helps, right? I don't know if you've experimented with parallel publishing, but often it's not enough. And then we can also try to deal with publishing loads by having a dedicated publishing instance. But the problem with this is there's a licensing cost, and for some people that's a real barrier. All right, so Sitecore had some theories about what's going on. Why are publishes getting more and more expensive as the product gets older and older? And some of the theories were, well, we got large file sizes, there's maybe network chattiness, and perhaps just, this is some really old code, it's been around for a very long time, and maybe it's just hit the end of its lifetime. So they decided to put it to a test. And we're going to recreate that same test that Stephen walked through at Symposium. So let's imagine publishing a single item, the home item that's right here, right? We've all seen this. You install Sitecore, you're going to get this home item. Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to read 8 different publish restriction fields. But the problem is you have to read those fields individually. So there's 8 trips to SQL right there. And then for each field, we must check standard values. Well, okay, let's go locate the template for that. Then let's find the standard values item. Let's check and read the field value we want. And then we'll need to read the base template field from that. Navigate to each base template. Most of these inherit from standard template. And then go to step 2. So there's iterations now we're doing on this loop here. And then you have to repeat this for each base template, looking for the standard values. So there's about average of 20 hops now. Now you need to do this for each field that we just talked about. Remember, there was 8 of them. So we already did one, so now we're up to 215 queries against SQL. So we're starting to see some chattiness here. So are we done? No. Now we got to check workflow. So we got to take the workflow state field, already read, go get that workflow state item, read the final field. Don't forget to check standard values. So remember that loop we just went through. We got to kind of repeat that loop now for this standard values on the final field. We're not done. Nope. Now we need to go check out the ancestors of the item. Because if an ancestor is not publishable, then the current item is not publishable. So that's pretty important. So we need to go crawl through all the ancestors. And we need to check the ancestors in the same way that we check the original item. So first, because remember we're at Sitecore/content/home, there's 2 ancestors we need to check in this trivial example. So we just doubled from 243 to now 486, because there's 1 ancestor, and guess what? We got to do it for the other ancestor, the top level ancestor. So now we're up to 729 trips. But the item's publishable, right? Are we done? Oh, never mind the fact that we still need to read all the fields that we need to copy from master to web. We're not even talking about that. But we're not done. Now we need to think about languages. Check the item for any other languages. Let's say we have 3. English, French, and Danish. Well, we already did English, but we got to do French, so we're doubling again. Now we got to do Danish. Now we're up to over 2,000. Please tell me we're done. Nope. Now we have to do multiple publishing targets. And hopefully you don't have many of these, but you might have a couple. I know for my clients I often do. So what happens with internet? That's the typical default one, right? Well, we've done that work, but now if we have, let's say, a preview publishing target, we double again. Are we done? Nope. Now we have to check for related items. You ever do that? Publish related items? What's that mean? Well, go check all the related items in the linked database. You found 1. In this trivial example, we found 1. Go through all the same checks as before. Do it for languages. Now do it for the publishing targets. My God, we're up to 8,700 trips to the database for the home item. Is that success? Well, not exactly, because we have polluted caches. Why? Well, you had to do loads of cold items into the cache, and performance can vary depending on how you've tuned those caches. So took a long time, a lot of chattiness to get that thing published, and we ruined some caches in the process. There's also this concern about data in motion. And what we mean by that is each item instance is, each item you're publishing, that's a data getting moved to the publishing target. And so if there's an error, then it happens on that one item, but there's no rollback. It's just going to keep going. So this isn't like a publishing in the old style is not transactional. It's fire and forget, basically. So if you have an error in any one of those, in this case, we were just trying to publish the home item. But what if we were trying to publish 100 and there was a particular error with one of them? It's going to continue to keep publishing past that error. There's not really good visibility into that. So what's the solution? Well, the concept of a publishing instance already exists. But we talked about the drawback around licensing cost. And there was also the technical hurdle of publishing binary assembly code is very tightly coupled at the moment. If you're in 8.1 and below, it's kind of hard to carve that out. But they did. And they did decouple it. So they also not only decoupled it, but they also optimized the features. And the way they decoupled the code was to build a modular architecture following ASP.NET Core. So how many of you are familiar with that? Right, that's was called vNext, now it's called ASP.NET Core. What they did is they created a publishing service. It's not a Windows service. They would have liked to have made it a Windows service, but unfortunately due to the time constraints around the release of ASP.NET Core, it wasn't quite ready. I think they were having some technical issues. So instead, the service runs in the context of IIS. But you can still think of it as a service. And I'm sure in the future it'll become a Windows service. I wouldn't be surprised. So the optimizations they did is more work up front. Before they start trying to do any data transfer, they're going to be checking permissions, checking workflow, checking all that data. They're going to do bulk operations instead of single operations. So let's not read one field at a time. Let's read them all. Let's get all that data. They also do transactional publish, right? So we can roll back on failure. And then we do parallel publishing. So if you have more than one target, publishing target, we're going to publish to those targets simultaneously if you want to. And you can also move media and items at the same time. So what does that look like now? Let's just run through the same process, but in our head, we're going to do it under the new regime. Well, we still have to read those 8 publishing fields, but we do that in bulk, so that's one trip. And then for each field, we have to check the standard values. Again, we're going to get all that at once, and we're going to store this in a cache, and this cache is around for the life cycle, the lifetime of the published job. So we'll be referring to this cache again and again. We're going to check read all those fields that are now in memory, so there's no trips there. And this can be done as often as we like without any read cost. Now we need to check a workflow, so there's an extra trip for that. And we're going to build a cache of that as well. We're going to compare the item state with cache, so no cache pollution, right? And we're going to check the workflow standard values from the template graph. Notice we're still only at 3 now. I think in the last run through, we were well above that, certainly. The item still needs all its ancestors checked. So we're going to grab all the ancestors at once, not one at a time. So there's another trip. And we're going to read all those again, we're going to read all those ancestors in one operation. The item, we check all the standard values and workflow as well, but these are already in our cache, so no trip there. The item is now in that publishable state. Do we have more than one language? Yeah, we do. Okay, fine. Well, we've done English. French, we've already read all the languages. Danish, we've already read all the languages. What about publishing targets? Well, the internet, we already did that publishing target. Unfortunately, we are going to have to make another trip for preview, so we're doubling there, but from 4 to 8 is not too bad. Now, don't forget the related items, so all right, let's go check the links database. Let's go find whatever's there. In our case, it's one related item. We have to do all the same checks for that, but bulk operation saves us here, so now we're only up to 10 SQL operations. Again, we have to check languages and targets. We're not getting any extra cost because remember we got all that data at once. So the winner is, at the end, we're done, right? I think it's pretty obvious. 8,753 versus 11. I'll take 11, please. So what's the conclusion here? Well, this wasn't about data size. So it wasn't large files killing us. It was about inefficient retrieval of data at large volumes. So data providers was designed for content delivery of content tens and thousands, not thousands and 10,000s. And that's what can happen in large publishing operations. You get very quickly in the tens of thousands and above. It's not hard to do. So they removed this bottleneck and they reduced the network noise with the specialized caches. Now what are some caveats here? I mean, obviously we need to be on 8.2. We can't be on an earlier version. This is still new. One of the major drawbacks or shortcomings currently, or a limitation, let's say, is if you're doing anything around the custom publishing pipeline, you're not going to be able to use this. You can still use 8.2. 8.2 still rolled with the old style of publishing, so you haven't lost that, but you're not going to be able to use this new publishing service, because the new publishing service does not run through the old publishing pipelines. Remember, it's bulk operations. It also doesn't emit the same publishing events as the current process. So if you're wired into events around publishing, you're going to need to think about that. Now, there's a possible saving clause here because there is a bulk publish end event, and that does get raised, and you can get a list of the items published from that event. So you might be able to do some refactoring your code and take advantage of that. I don't know if any of you use Oracle databases. I never do, but to be complete, I listed it. And also, there's no support for custom data providers, again, because of the bulk operations. All right, that is the whirlwind tour of the new Ludicrous Speed publishing service. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yes, it scales. Well, you see what's happening, right? Is there's this doubling problem because of the way that they're having to examine the item and then related items and the languages, which are treated as versions of that item, and then the publishing targets, which are separate databases. You get this doubling issue that happens. So, yeah, up front, reading 8.8 fields right up front, I mean, okay, it's 8 trips. That's not the end of the world. But when you have to start doubling and doubling and doubling, you're suddenly traveling to the moon and back just to publish an item. Any other questions? Okay.
So I think we need to add to all the thanks that were done at the beginning of this. Thank everybody who has stuck it out so far, because we've lost a few. Last presentation we have today, it's Corey Smith and George Chang from Perficient. We touched a little bit earlier on Helix, and they're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into that. You know, particularly for those of, you know, if you're trying to build a site that's got long legs that you're going to be working with for a long time, you want it built around a set of principles that are going to endure different developers, different shops, different updates to Sitecore, all those things. This is the answer to that, and we're going to hear more about that now.
Thank you, sir. All right, Helix, the fuel of successful solution. A little bit about your presenters, George.
George Chang, I'm a solutions architect at Perficient. If you want to hear more Twitter rants or other insightful thoughts, you can find me at Sitecore George on Twitter.
And I'm Corey Smith. I graduated from UGA in 2011 with a degree in computer science. Been working with Perficient since then. I've been doing Sitecore development for the past year. Really excited to be talking to you guys about Helix tonight. So the goals of tonight's presentation, just give you a high-level overview of Helix. I could talk for 4 hours about this. In fact, George and I actually sat through a 4-hour class on Helix and Habitat at Sitecore Symposium. It was awesome, but we don't have that much time today. And also kind of give you a little overview of the value of Helix to your projects, maybe both as an implementation partner and as a customer who would be receiving a Helix project from one of your vendors. So what is Helix? Helix is a maintenance-focused modular architecture. The primary goal of Helix is maintenance, above all else, I think. And it's just a recommended set of principles and conventions, right? So this isn't supposed to be dogmatic, it's pragmatic. I think Thomas Elblum told us in our class that whenever you're going and looking at picking up Helix for your business, be very critical of it, right? Only pick things in Helix that make sense for your business. If they don't, let them go, that's fine. Sitecore is not gonna chastise you for it, no one is. Just pick what works for you. And also, Helix, it's not prescriptive in the tools that you need to use. Helix stresses that you should really put your architecture and conventions above all else, above your tooling. So if you ever go look at Habitat, you'll see that they do a lot of unconventional things, like they don't use Visual Studio to build their projects, and that just kind of goes down to the fact that, hey, we've got these conventions that maybe Visual Studio doesn't support for us, so we're going to make our own tools for that. So what about Habitat? It was talked about a little bit earlier. Habitat is just an example. Helix is the book that you read, right? This is how you do A, B, and C. And maybe you fall asleep when you're reading the book or something, so they've got Habitat to go alongside it, so you can actually see how those things are implemented by Sitecore. Again, as it was mentioned earlier, I think whenever Habitat was first introduced, there was a lot of confusion about it. A lot of people thought, hey, this is Sitecore coming to us and telling the community, this is a starting place for your projects. It's not. It's just an example. It doesn't come with a warranty. It's not production tested. So we'll dive a little bit into the architecture principles for Helix. the modules, layers, and dependencies. These are kind of the big keywords that you're going to hear in further presentations about Helix and as you go and read the documentation. So your projects are going to be laid out like this in Helix. This is what they recommend. You've got 3 layers: project, features, and foundation. Project, this is going to be your channel. This is how you're going to deliver your Helix projects to your consumers. That could be your website. That could be EXM if you're using Email Experience Manager. That could be RSS, or it could even be a brochure or a pamphlet if you're using PXM. The next layer down, projects, they'll depend on your features. These are going to be things that map to your business needs, like news, search, etc. And then your feature modules are going to depend on foundation modules. Foundation modules, those are going to be things that you change these, they can affect your entire project. Sitecore is a foundation module. The .NET framework is a foundation module. CSS frameworks and JavaScript frameworks like Bootstrap or jQuery, those are going to go down in the foundation layer. So one of the things that Helix really sets out to address is the problem of dependencies in your projects, right? I'm sure that a lot of us have seen this in the things that we've done. As you have more features in your projects, this is less, that's more down there. The amount of time that you spent on your features, gray, goes down significantly, right? So if you've only got one module, one feature in your project, well, if you want to go add a new feature to that module, that's all you're going to spend your time on. But if you've got 100, you're probably, if you're not managing your dependencies properly, going to spend more time actually making sure that you're not breaking other things in your system than updating that module. So Helix tells us, have your dependencies going from the top down, right? Again, go from project, let that depend on your feature modules, no interdependencies in the project layer. Have your feature modules, they don't depend on each other, but only depend on foundation modules. And again, your layers: project, topmost, features, middlemost, foundation. Gorgeous. Another thing, with the modules, one of the biggest things I think that they said in our Habitat class that we took was what changes together stays together. So I've got a lot of custom .NET development before Sitecore, and I think one of the traditional ways of going and organizing your solutions is kind of separating things out into a UI layer, a business logic layer, and a data layer, right? And so whenever you've got these 3 layers, what you might be doing is taking a module like shopping cart, for example, and it's going to have some presentation, right? It's going to have some business logic. It's going to have some data layer logic. And so whenever you go in and make changes to that, you're probably going to hit all 3 of those. Again, if you're not managing your dependencies correctly, somehow you might accidentally mess up the customer management module whenever you're touching the data layer for the shopping cart. I hope you're more careful, but mistakes happen. And so Helix says don't do that. Instead, kind of keep your modules together. What changes together stays together again. So you'll have a shopping cart module, and inside of that have its own UI layer, its own business layer, its own data layer. Customer management, the same thing. And that really helps with managing dependencies and maintaining your projects going forward. Now George is going to talk a little bit on information architecture.
All right, so in Helix, one of the major things that differentiates Helix from kind of your typical Sitecore implementation is the information architecture that Helix recommends you put out there, right? So Corey had talked about these 3 levels. It reflects in a similar way in the information architecture and in the way that the code is developed. So if you've ever poked around in Habitat, you've probably seen this more times than you would care for. So the information architecture divides it up into a layer, a module, and then an item, right? So this is super tiny, so you can't see it, which is smart on my part. But on the left, you have this is Habitat in Visual Studio, and so you'll see there's a project up here. It's called sitecore.feature.demo because no one can read it. You'll have your controllers, your models, your views in here, right? This is that sitecore.feature.demo is your module, and here's all your various layers within your module. I have the views folder expanded, and one of the components in here is called demo content.cshtml. So on the right, we have our Sitecore content tree, and it's shaped in a similar way. So under the layout rendering section, there's a feature folder, and then under the feature folder, there's each of the modules, each of the feature modules. So there's a demo module, and then under there is there's a demo content rendering. So you can kind of see there's a parallel between the two. So it's organized in a very similar way. So Helix also defines a couple of item types. The first being definition items. So these are typically items that you as a developer would be putting into a content tree. So these are things like rendering items, templates, placeholder settings, dictionary values, anything you put in core, anything that's typically a developer-oriented Sitecore item. So see there's a little flow on the right. It's as a developer, you're creating these items. They're getting pushed to a development environment, which gets pushed to a production environment, and then used by a content author. The other item type are content items, right? So these are page items. These are page assets, data source items, so carousels, things like that, images, any kind of media. And you can see that on the right, it's flipped in reverse. So this is content that's generated by content authors. These content items are created in the production environment, and then once they're in the production environment, if you want to work on them some more, you can push them reversely into the development environment, and developers can use that as the basis of their of making enhancements, right, with existing production content. Helix also defines a number of template types, and I think these are just fancy names for templates that we all make every day. The interface template, which is basically a base template. So these are templates that really serve no other purpose but to serve as a base template for other templates. Page type templates, so these are any kinds of templates with presentation on them. So any pages, article pages, case study pages, product detail pages. A data source template, so these are any kind of data or any kind of data content items that don't have a presentation item to it. So these could be like slides in a carousel, or a call out, or something that's part of a page or as a data source of a rendering. Also something called they categorize a settings template. So these are content items in the content tree that populate fields in other parts of the content tree where you would use a lookup drop-down list or things like that. So those are settings templates. And then they also define that to use folder templates and not to use the standard Sitecore folder template. The big reasoning for that is by having specific folder templates for different types of items, you can have insert options assigned to them. And this just makes life easier, a lot easier for content authors, being able to know what kind of item templates can be inserted into particular folders so that the wrong content item doesn't get put in. So we kind of talked about all this Helix stuff, but why are we, why do we even care, right? We've been building Sitecore sites for so many years. They've been working. No one's been unhappy, generally. So the first is that it encourages content reuse, right? Content reuse is a big thing. You don't want content authors entering content multiple times in different places in the site. It can cause confusion. And more importantly, they can change something somewhere thinking it'll change everywhere, but it doesn't. Organization, so we kind of looked at the project structure and the content tree structure a little bit earlier. So as a developer or as a content administrator, you know where you're going to look for particular content items, and you know where you're going in the code, in a solution, to find particular pieces of code. If I'm a Sitecore developer and I'm coming to do maintenance on an existing Helix project, I already understand how that solution is laid out, and I know where to go look to change particular things. This also enhances personalization, and this kind of flows back into content reuse a little bit. By breaking up everything in a modular architecture and a modular content structure, this makes personalization a lot easier to handle. Fourthly, Sitecore said so. These are recommendations given by Sitecore. Again, they're recommendations, but Sitecore said so. And all this results in happy content authors, which is all our goals, is for content authors not to yell at us, not to call us at 3 o'clock in the morning, so we sleep better at night. I like that. Let's all applaud for sleep better at night. Yeah, that touched the nerve. The last section we want to cover a little bit is about development lifecycle management. So the Helix documentation does give some guidance around development management and DevOps. And so the summation of all that section is automate everything. This topic is near and dear to my heart because it drives me crazy when it's not done right. So these are just a couple of things, a lot of things that you would want to take into account as you're kind of defining your lifecycle management for your development lifecycle management for your Sitecore implementations. First off, version control. This should be a gimme. Git, Team Foundation version control, which in my mind does not exist anymore. You would want a build orchestrator. So these are things like TFS, VSTS, TeamCity, Jenkins, Bamboo, 500 other things. Basically, something to control your builds, do your builds automatically, pulling from repositories or any kind of source control, and being able to do your builds in an automated fashion. Package managers, this is a big deal. So being able to have consistency in using external packages in your solution, so you don't wind up with dependency version conflicts. NuGet for your DLLs, NPM for your client-side goodies. Using a task runner. So the two big ones are Gulp and Grunt. So if you've never used a task runner, basically they're typically based on Node.js, and they do exactly as what their name describes, is they run tasks. So you can give it you can configure a number of tasks to be run, and they can have dependencies on one another, and they can flow in a particular order. Mostly they're used for things like compiling less, compiling Sass, minifying your JS files, a number of other things that you could do in an automated process. These typically hook into these build orchestrators pretty well, so definitely a good tool to have in your arsenal. Item management, I've seen a lot of Sitecore solutions where we just have code and we don't know what we do with our items. A lot of times those are packages. It makes me wince, but it's okay. But there's some solutions out there. There's TDS, there's Unicorn. As part of the Helix standards, it does define that you want to keep items, especially the definition items that we talked about earlier, in source control, and so that they're deployable. Also unit tests, because everyone writes those, and release management to manage all your various environments that you're deploying to. So your development integration environment, your staging environments, your production environments. The whole reason for all of this is that you have a repeatable automated process, right? Anytime you have human intervention, regardless of who it is, you're going to wind up, there's always the risk of error, right? And having an automated process, having a scripted process will save you from that. So Helix and you, we had talked a lot about SXA tonight. That's probably the gateway drug into Helix, along with Habitat. It's the easiest way to get in. The experience editor, I know not everyone develops for the experience editor. You should. It's a Slack venting channel joke. And then have a process, right? Anytime you have a repeatable process, you save yourself from yourself. So how do you get started with Helix? There's Helix documentation at helix.sitecore.net. It's a fun read. There's the Habitat project on GitHub. And again, this is a reference project and not what you should just copy and build your projects on. For the 15th time, do not copy Habitat and build your projects on it. We've mentioned the Sitecore Slack channel already. There's a channel on there called Helix-Habitat because it started as Habitat, and we decided that it should cover both. And also, on the new Sitecore Stack Exchange, there's a Helix tag for all questions Helix related. Shameless plug here. Corey and I, along with many others at Perficient, we have our hands in developing a development framework called Ignition that is on GitHub. It's open source. It is a Helix compliant development accelerator, and it just makes your life a lot easier. So please feel free to check it out on GitHub. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so who's ready to go out and make a copy of Habitat to start their next site? Right? I'm doing it. No, it's cool. It's okay if you want to fail. That's it. We're not going to belabor this a whole lot longer. I got to say that from all the time I have been coming to Atlanta, and even during the lull when we weren't having these events, it's incredible to see this many people come out tonight. I'm really hoping that we can keep up this enthusiasm. I think our next one's planned for March. Anyone want to do it sooner? March it is. Okay, great. I expect to see everyone here and bring a friend. You know, tell them the bar's free and they'll get their tickets when they get here. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate you coming out.